Welcome to This Week from the Principal's Desk, a podcast about Lutheran schools and their leadership. This podcast is hosted by two Lutheran school leaders. My name is Rob Lunak, and I'm the superintendent of Lutheran neighborhood schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my co-host is Mike Mschiemann.
My name is Mike Mschiemann, and I'm principal at Bethany Lutheran School in Parma, Ohio. And today, Rob and I are going to talk a little bit about the idea about professional development, ongoing learning, and the idea of being lifelong learners. Modeling that, of course, as administrators, but then how to inspire your staff with that as well. Rob and I were both on a Zoom call yesterday, and we were talking about the idea of culture. And I know we've talked about that on the podcast before. But what is the offshoot of culture? Well, you're hoping then that it's going to be staff that want to be in your school, and then that you can attract staff to be a part of your ministry. But then once they're there, the question becomes, how do you enable them to strengthen their strengths, to continue with the passion that they have for teaching kids? And one of the ways, not the only way, of course, but one of the ways is to continue to invest in the people that God has put in your midst. And so as administrators, we want to do whatever we can to support and to help our staff grow to the aspired level of excellence that they have for themselves and the level of excellence that we want to see them aspire to. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about this and share some ideas, maybe things that we've done in our own schools, and hopefully spur on some thoughts for you about how you can continue to develop your teachers in their craft.
And it's so important, and we all know it's so important. And one of those things I want to point out from the get-go is the vast majority of your teachers want to improve. You might have somebody that drags their feet on it, but that is the exception, not the rule. And I want to encourage everyone listening to get away from professional development is only something we do in a staff meeting. Professional development is only something we do during a conference. You have teachers who are constantly looking for better lesson plans, better classroom management ideas, better testing strategies. They're always looking at something, and that is professional development that we need to get them to recognize as professional development as well. I'll go as far to say, if you are a preschool teacher and you're looking up bulletin board ideas on Pinterest, you are developing as a professional. I'll go as far as to say that. So it doesn't need to just be, I'm sending this person to a conference, we're reading this book as a staff. There are so many ways teachers develop as professionals. And so we're going to talk about the bigger ones today, conferences, funding for things, bringing in speakers, but that doesn't mean that those are the only ways, okay? So recognize people, and teachers like to hear that too. If you walk past somebody's room and they have a new bulletin board up, you should say something to them about their bulletin board. Hey, that bulletin board looks really great. I really love how you did that. Or if you see anything that you like in the room, you just bring it up. Hey, that looks new. Did you come up with that? Where did that come from? Tell me a little bit about that. They want to be able to talk to you about that. And I think so often when teachers say that they don't like professional development, what they really mean is they don't see the benefit to it, and they don't get recognized for the work they're already doing. So keep that in mind as we have this conversation. So Mike, how do you get teachers excited about kind of those big things so they view it as something they want to keep doing?
That's a great question. So let me answer that by kind of sharing a story that when I first became an administrator, I was evaluating staff. And of course, in the evaluation method, it's going to come out with, here are your goals for the coming school year, or whatever length of time you have goals set for. And I was realizing, I've got these goals for this staff member and these goals for that staff member, and all the way across the board. And then we would have these professional development days. Well, I would bring in a speaker to talk to the whole staff. And I'm thinking, as I specifically remember one day, I'm hearing the speaker talk. And I thought to myself, well, that's helping those staff members with their goals. These guys could probably give the presentation to the rest of the staff. And these other ones, it doesn't really apply to them. And so, they're checking stuff on their phone or whatever. And I had that revelation that day that I think to really get people invested in professional development, it's just like teachers in the classroom that need to personalize or differentiate learning. We need to personalize and differentiate professional development. So it was shortly after that time when I said to the staff, I'm going to change my model on this. Rather than doing like all staff, let's bring somebody in, I want to come to you and I want to say, what would you like to learn more about? And we actually did a lot of great things that year where staff were going all over the place. They came to me with their ideas. And of course, I had some ideas and I had to go to some and say, hey, I think you might benefit from this. But then they would go off and do their things that they would do. But my caveat was that they had to come back and share what they learned with the staff. Now, again, that might not hit everybody. If somebody's going to a presentation on, middle school science, it's not going to matter to my preschool teachers. But for them to be able to share what they learned, there was an accountability level there. So I think if we can find ways to personalize that professional development, you're going to get greater buy-in from your teachers. It just makes them, you have resident experts in your area. So it's important for them to recognize, I mean, things are always changing. There's always new methods, there's new resources, there's new ideas. The world is changing around us. So it's super important to keep teachers engaged by keeping them current. And professional development is a gift that you can give to your staff. What about you, Rob? What do you think?
One of the things I would usually do is we'd have a faculty meeting, usually March, and I'd say, okay, we're thinking ahead to next year. What professional development we want to put on the schedule? And I gave them an hour in that meeting. I want you to go look at things you'd want to learn. We had a Google spreadsheet that everyone put into, and I said, pick 3 things. That could be a book you want to read. It could be a conference you want to go to. It could be a little training you want to attend, and get those in there. And then I could look at those. Is there any overlap in them? And that tells me what they think as teachers they need. Now, at the beginning, you get a lot of people like, oh, there's a conference in Hawaii, huh? Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, that's a science conference, and you're the social studies teacher. Can you tell me how that applies other than it's in Hawaii, right? You get everybody, those jokes come up every once in a while. But it got them excited about looking at things, and you as principal are not always going to be able to find everything that will be impactful for everyone. You need to distribute that leadership a little bit and let them tell you what they want to attend. I had a teacher say, hey, I really want to go to the Ron Clark Academy down in Georgia. And I'm like, okay, let's look at it. And I sent her, and that was a great experience for her, and she brought a lot of cool things back. One of the things that will happen, and there are different opinions on this, so I'm going to give everybody mine. That doesn't mean it's the right answer. It's just my answer. If you have a teacher who comes to you and says, why does X person always get to go to these things? You should have an answer to defend that, because that will happen. Well, why do they get to go? And as principals, we know what that answer is. That person is probably a leader on your faculty. That person is probably doing a lot of the work. That person has a desire to grow. Some people in our Lutheran schools want to do kind of the traditional things, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean that you treat them all equally when it comes to those conference opportunities. You want to make sure they all grow. But you're going to put your resources where they're best going to be used. And when it comes to people, that is sometimes an awkward conversation to have. Like, hey, actually, I think we're going to get more results out of this person going to this thing than if I had sent you to this opportunity. And you need to be able to have that conversation with people. That's probably my least favorite part about professional development, because you have limited resources. You can't send everybody to every conference. You have to make a decision. And that sometimes can be a little fraught for some people, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I know I've had those conversations before too. In some cases, if my filter wasn't working on some days, when people say, well, why didn't you send me to anything? I want to say, because you haven't asked. Ask and you will receive. Is there something that you want to go to? But I love your idea of having them research in a meeting. I've never done that before, and I will now. I think that's fantastic. But one of the things that we'll talk about in a bit is, there's budget implications for sure. But you think about, what do we say to the teachers when you're teaching kids? The best thing is to do hands-on learning with the kids. I mean, they'll go through all of Bloom's taxonomy, all this kind of stuff, but going from let's not just read about it, let's do it. And I think we need to have that mindset for our teachers as well, that professional development, you want it to be experiential. And so it does mean that they may need to go somewhere to get something beneficial, but that's okay. Of course, you're going to have to figure out things like, how does this impact their time away from their family? Or you're going to need to budget for extra subs that you have at the school or whatever. So there's implications there. But the more that teachers can experience something, it just gives a whole other level of understanding for them to be able to come back and apply it into their classrooms. We here at Bethany at the end of last year, I I thought I had tapped into all my title funding, and the government emailed me and said, "No, you've got this much money left over." And, okay, I'm not giving it back to you. I'm going to spend it. So I actually sent two of my teachers to the ISTE conference. ISTE is the International Society for Technology in Education. If you've never heard of ISTE, look it up. It's worth it to become a member just for the resources that they put out. But it was in Philadelphia, about probably an 8-hour drive from here in Cleveland. And these teachers went, and oh my gosh, they came back on fire for what they were going to do with technology in their classroom. And now they're leaders on my staff. They are the tech people that people go to, but they've also found out tons of resources that they're now implementing with the kids. Now he came back and said, "Yeah, you're going to have to spend more money than just the conference because now I need stuff." That's great, no problem at all. But they had that experience that really made them the leaders on my staff in that area. So one other idea I want to throw at you, because this is free and I've done it in the school, every school I've been principal of, except I haven't done it yet here. I coordinated with another local Lutheran school principal. I looked at the calendar and we booked a day that we had off, but they did not. And we flipped it for the other way around. And then what we said is our staff is going to come into your school and simply observe a day of school. Because one thing teachers don't typically get to do is see other teachers teach. So we would go in and we usually started the day, the principal would give a presentation to my staff about their school, and then I would do the same for his staff later. And then we would just go through the day, and I'd give the teachers stuff to look at the routines of the classroom, simply from asking to get a drink of water to line leaders to organization. But then look at what resources is the teacher using? How are they interacting with the kids? Look at the tangible things in the classroom, the bulletin boards, the setup, all those different things. And then glean as much information as you can. And that day always got rave reviews from the staff. They felt very accomplished, and they came back with some just really practical ideas. So it doesn't have to be super, super deep, or it doesn't have to be something where, okay, we do need to all read a book together and glean stuff from it. It can just be go and see, go and do, and go and learn.
Yeah, that's a great idea. If there's another school within an hour of you, it would be beneficial for you to go connect with them and go see what they're doing. If you are in a large school, I'm talking maybe you have 40 teachers on staff, real, real big, you can even do that internally. And you can say, hey, today I want these teachers to spend today going around seeing these rooms. I've gotten subs for you. We've figured this schedule out. So you're just going to be observing what other people are doing today. And that does a couple things. It helps the teacher observing. The teacher being observed really forces them to step up from wherever they're at. And maybe they're great already, but they're just going to put in a little extra effort because they know they have another adult in the building. Another thing that I've seen schools do, especially when it comes to, okay, we're having trouble with this part in the classroom, or we're having trouble with maybe this transition, what do we do? Is be a student for a day. You just are a sixth grader for a day. You get the backpack, you get the locker, you transition like they do, you sit in the desks like they do, you sit through everything like they do. And seeing it through their eyes really points out any areas that are strengths and weaknesses for your staff for professional development. Because if you, as an adult, have to sit in a tiny, uncomfortable chair and you realize that you're bored to tears, you go, okay, we need to work on instructional strategies. That's something we can work on. Or maybe it's, hey, we had this great, awesome activity. My classroom isn't that active. The kids really loved it. I really loved it. Now I see that there's another way to do that, and I want to bring that into my room. Hey, tell me how you did that. It was great to see it. So you don't need to always be able to send somebody to a big conference, which, side note, they're going to come back and they're going to talk about how great the experience was if it was a good one. And it's going to sound like it was just this big party with a bunch of other teachers. And that's not always a bad thing because they were excited about what they were doing. They made a lot of connections. They did learn a lot of things. We sent our teachers to LEA several years back when it was in Grand Rapids, and the teachers walked to the Blue Bridge there and took a picture. And I had a parent we had a day off of school so they could go take a picture by a bridge. And I had to explain, well, this is what they were here for. This is what we were doing. It helps them become better teachers, which helps them better serve the students. So you're going to be able to tell that story, but you will have to defend that from time to time. There are a lot of organizations that are great professional resources. You want to talk about some of those, Mike?
Yeah, there's a ton out there. And I mean, you almost have to be selective for what you're going to become members of because everybody wants you to be a member. The National Association of Elementary School Principals, or NAESP, is one of them. ASCD is the Association for School Curriculum Development. I'm going to put a little plug in for ASCD. I've been a member for years, and the membership isn't super expensive, but they actually mail you free books throughout the year. And one of the things that I have done every year I've been a member is I'll get a free book and look at the topic and then just say which one of my teachers is going to benefit the most from reading this book. And I'll actually go to the teacher and say, hey, listen, I have not read this book. I have no idea what's in it. I mean, ASCD, that's it. And I trust them because I've read so much of their material. And I'll just say, would you be willing to read this book and then give a brief report at a staff meeting on what this was all about? And they're like, cool, I get a free book. And then they do it. Sometimes they're like, yeah, it didn't really hit me. And other times they're like, oh my gosh, this was exactly what I needed. Um, so those are a couple. I do, of course, want to highlight LEA, Lutheran Education Association. There's a lot of great resources that LEA puts out. Most of them are free or they're accessible. You can easily connect with people through LEA. And let me tell you one other idea that spurred from LEA. I've been attending those conferences for years as well. And I get to know some of the breakout presenters, some of the keynote people. And so if I am looking for something to maybe hit a larger group of people, go back to your LEA stuff because those presenters are often willing to come in and talk to staff or smaller groups. But it's basically a Rolodex of real quality presenters because LEA vets their presenters for every conference. And if they're up there presenting, they've got something good to share. So I think that's one way you can personalize some professional development for your staff, help them become members of these organizations. I've paid for their memberships. I know that can be dicey because the school is paying for something where they get a personal benefit. At the end of the day, the kids are who benefit. And so if you can afford to do it, it's going to help the teachers. It's going to help the students as well. But I really think some of this, we talk about in our evaluations, should you help people in their areas of weakness or help them grow their areas of strength, right? I'm a big grow your area of strength guy. Have them become an expert in that area. And I think professional development can be a great way to highlight early adopters on your staff, or it can make somebody even more effective in a particular area and they're your resident expert. One of the things then that may happen is you could encourage them to present what they've learned at an LEA conference or at a place where they can take their learning to the next level and become a resource to share that with others. So there's so many benefits on how this can grow future school leaders, maybe even administrators, and bring them into admin roles in various topics, or it could even lead to them with doctoral dissertations or master's thesis work. All of that stuff builds your staff. And if you can do that and you can have that passion for seeing them learn, you're supporting your school in ways that you'll never know.
And that encouraging them to present at conferences is so important because it's one thing to say, hey, can you talk to our staff at a staff meeting? And it's another thing to say, hey, I think this is so awesome. I want you to share it with people we don't know. I want you to go to a conference and present. And you know what? I want you to submit it to these two places. And if they accept it, we're going to send you there, right? You can use that as a little bit of a carrot if you need to. But LEA is always a great one. Your district conferences are always a great one. Just encourage those people to get out there because as a leader, your job is to grow people and lead people. And that means you are growing them to be better leaders. And occasionally that means I have very rarely met Lutheran school principals with egos. So this next part might be preaching to the choir. But if you have anybody that you want to encourage to grow, but you're worried that they're going to overshadow someone else, you need to get rid of that concern. You just need to put that aside and go, it's best for everyone, the better everybody is. And so if that means somebody gets overshadowed, hey, that's just a growth opportunity. Don't worry about that. So definitely encourage them to get out there and share what they know and present. And that's such an awesome thing to be able to do. We've all sat through breakout sessions or sectionals at conferences, and we've left and gone, oh, that wasn't very good. We've all been there. So if you have somebody who has something awesome and you know that they're going to make sure other people don't have a terrible experience, send them to things. That is one of the best things you can do to show that you truly have faith in their ability, is that I want you to share this outside of our four walls. That's really, really important. One of the other things I think we can highlight with LEA, can we talk about this? We can talk about this, right?
Do it.
Okay.
Do it.
Mike and I are starting another podcast with LEA about kind of best practices in schools. It's going to be called What Works for Me. And it's going to be us talking to other people about the great things they're doing so we can get those out to more and more people. It's nice that Mike and I get to do this, but there is this wealth of experience. Mike and I are this tiny little drop in this big ocean of expertise, right? And so we're going to get involved with a lot of people and get more of those great ideas out there. So keep an eye out for that. I think we can say that that's coming. That is in the works. That it'll be here before we know it.
We have covered a lot, but I think before we wrap it up, I think we should talk about funding, because funding professional development can be a trick. Conferences are expensive. Travel, meals, accommodations. Yay! How do you work with all that? Well, the first thing I would say is don't skimp on professional development. So what I tend to do is at the beginning of the year, or like even before the year starts, I do a spreadsheet. I have every single staff member's name on it. And I have all the conferences and things that they want to do, plus other things like first aid and CPR or any kind of licensure stuff that they need, some of the boring stuff too. But I put it all on there, and then I map out what's the cost going to be, and it comes up with a number. I encourage you, even if you think I have no money for professional development, do that anyway. In an ideal world, what would your best professional development plan for your staff cost? And then my challenge to you is fund it. There's ways to do that. First off, I'm sure if you don't know how, contact your local school district, because there's going to be Title IIA that you can tap into. Now, of course, that's public funding through your school district, and there's going to be restrictions on that. But generally, they will work with you. I mean, where I am now, I can get a portion of my professional development covered through Title IIA if it is not religious and blah, blah, all that stuff. But that's okay. Tap into that money. I would encourage you to put some into your budget, put some skin in the game from your school. And even if it's just a little bit, it shows a commitment to growing your teachers. And I've said before in other podcasts, if you really want me to get a feel for what your school is like, show me your budget. I'll tell you where your priorities are. Make a priority professional development. And then also don't be scared to ask people, hey, listen, we really want to do this with the staff. I think it would be a huge benefit for the kids. Would you be willing to give a gift for this? You know who your deep pockets are around you. I'm hoping that everybody knows at least one deep pocket around them, because they exist. Ask them, but then also don't discount the free stuff. There is some good free stuff out there. There's some free garbage out there too, but I mean, you get to vet that. You'll know. One of the free things that I will highlight is the Best Practices in Ministry Conference. This takes place in Phoenix every February. The conference is free. The food is free. You do need to get yourself to Phoenix and pay for your accommodations. And I know that's not cheap, but I mean, conferences can run, just the registration fee can run $500,000. And then you tack other stuff on top of it. That's at least something that is going to be a little less pricey. Sometimes your staff will chip in. They'll say, you know what? If you can get me to this conference, I'm willing to pay for my hotel, or I'll pay for my flight if you pay for the rest of it. That's super generous. If that's what it takes to allow that development to happen, don't be scared to have that conversation either. But I encourage you and challenge you to figure out what you need to fund, and then lift that up to God, who provide for all your needs through his riches in Christ. It'll come. So don't skimp on your Pro D, show it in your funding, make it happen.
Yeah, it's one of those really, really important areas, because your continued growth as a school depends on the continued growth of the people in your building. And if your teachers aren't growing, think of like a mechanic. If you have a mechanic and he learned how to work on cars in 1981 and he never learned anything about cars since, is he a good mechanic anymore? The answer is no. The same is true for teaching. Things change. That is life. Things continue to change. And so we need to continue to stay on top of those things. One thing I'll point out, only because this is something I do frequently, conferences are expensive. And I've reached out to places and like, hey, can I volunteer for like part of the day to get a reduced rate? They generally don't advertise that, but a lot of places are like, sure, we'll work something out, right? They're open to that. Or if you know somebody who's going, hey, can I share a ride with you if you're driving? Or can we share a room? Can we split a room? People are usually willing to do that. And the Lutheran network is pretty broad. So if you know there's a church nearby where this conference is, you could always reach out to that pastor and be like, would anybody host me for 2 days, right? People are more than willing to do that. You got to get a little creative for sure if you don't have the money. But that's, when you have more money, you don't have to be as creative. But when you don't have a lot of money, you got to be really creative. That's just the nature of the beast sometimes. But yes, Mike is right. It's got to be in your budget. It's got to be a priority. And don't be afraid to ask people. Now, if you are getting a lot of no's on those asks, you need to look at what is the message you are telling people. If it is, hey, I want to send the teachers because it's going to be a lot of fun, well, I'm not going to say yes to that either a lot of the time. I need to know how it's going to help students, how it's going to help your community. And it might just be a messaging problem if you got a lot of people saying no. But that is something that is fixable because there is someone in every one of our congregations who wants to see the school grow and they want to help in absolutely any way they can. And maybe that way is financial, right? So don't be afraid to ask. The worst they can ever say, as we say all the time, worst they can say is no. The best they can say is, hey, it's totally funded. Look at that.
Or anywhere in between. Yeah. Well, good. I think we've done a good job kind of opening up the conversation at least. And if you have other ideas or if you have things that have really worked for you, please share those. You can certainly send myself, send Rob an email or get a hold of us. Or we would love to be able to share some of your best practices. And we will in the podcast. Rob mentioned it's coming. But I strongly encourage you to commit to this. It is for the best of your school. It's best for the best of your staff and ultimately for the best of your teachers. So, Rob, do you have any closing words or you want to just close us off in prayer?
Just one crazy idea that just flew into my head that I feel like we should mention. Mike and I, we love being able to help other schools. So if you are listening to any of this and you're like, man, I wish they could talk to my staff about X, just call us. We won't say no. We're willing to do that. Right? You can pay for my gas, maybe buy me lunch, right? I'm not going to be one of those $2,000. Or we'll Zoom. Zoom costs nothing. This is free, right? So if there's ever any way Mike and I can help in professional development in any way, talking to teachers, helping you with a plan, we'd love to do that.
Yep, for sure. All right. Sounds good. Well, Rob, why don't you close us up with prayer on this one?
Absolutely. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for our Lutheran schools, for their leaders, their students, their teaching leaders, the people that support them. Please be with us as we find new ways to support the work that we're doing. Allow us to grow and to learn in you, and allow us to find the best ways to reach the students you've placed in our paths. Please be with us today. Bring us peace, patience, wisdom, and a joy to continue the work that you've placed before us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.